Hi, welcome to the Anxious Developer Podcast with me, Predovich. Here I share my knowledge on how to reduce your stress, become more present and productive as a developer. Let's make writing code fun again. In today's episode, me and our special guest today are going to talk about resilience. I would like to introduce our guest for today. He worked as a behavioral scientist in the US Air Force. He was a former college American boxer. He's an entrepreneur and the founder of several companies like Braver and his current company, Trustio. He's my long-term business partner and friend. Please welcome everyone, Brock Predovich. Hi,
Hello.
Brock. How are you doing?
Pretty good. This is my very first podcast, so I'm a little nervous.
Yeah. I never had any guests or especially a video type podcast, but I saw Spotify recently introduced video podcasts
Really?
on their platform. Yeah, so I think it's booming. So I'll follow the trend a little bit.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'd like to go in the topic for today about resilience. And I would just love to get your insight about resilience and what does it mean for you, and what does it mean for you to be resilient, and how do you define that?
For me, I think resilience is just being prepared for anything, whatever comes in life. Life is not all sunshine and rainbows, and you go through hard times, and I have. But it's being prepared for those things and having the mindset to overcome whatever does come your way. So resilience is not only just a state of mind, but it's also, I believe, practices that you have, tools that you have with your psychology, tools that you have that you will help you get through those tough times. It's developing those tools.
I remember I was talking with my psychologist about sometimes I'll work too long, not like too long, but without breaks. Mm-hmm. And I would think that's resilience, like when you work without stopping, and then, I work for 8 hours a day. So that's like, I'm pretty tough. Mm-hmm. And then after a psychology session, because this was getting me into sometimes burnout, and like at the end of the day, I'll be like very exhausted because I didn't take any breaks. And probably you remember we're like sometimes working together IRL, and then you'll see me like, I'm not really taking breaks. Mm-hmm. I mean, which is, fine for some time, but when you do it like more often, this gets on your back. So I was talking with my therapist about it, and then I was like shocked, not like shocked, but yeah, I didn't know that resilience actually means something else. So she said to me, it's not about like how long you work, it's about how many times you take a break and then you come back to the work, because my fear was that if I take a break, I cannot focus again, and I'll not be able to get back on the work. And then maybe I take a too big break. I go on my Instagram, social media. So that was a really good point, that it's about how many times you come back, you take a break and then you come back to working again, and being mindful about like not spending too much time on social media and like all those things. But it's changed my perspective, right?
Yeah, I really like that. I haven't really thought of that before, but that's true. Like I think that is, part of the definition of resilience is, like what they say is, you get knocked down 9 times, you get up, 10. You just keep, every time you get knocked down, you get back up. So that's a definition of resilience, but also resilience in terms of work. Yes, like sometimes you get tired, sometimes you need to take a little break, something like that. I was, I've been the same way as you, like most of my life, where it was just like, you got to work and take no breaks and all that kind of stuff. And, I considered I was proud of that, like how much I could work and all that kind of stuff. And I think over the last, year and a half, 2 years, I've become more aware of how that ends up hurting me when I do that. And so I need to be more mindful of, just mindful of my body and mindful of my mind, and just being aware that, hey, like right now I'm not where I need to be, like mentally. If I'm writing something or doing something, I need to take a little break. And so like defining resilience in that way, like in terms of work, is really interesting. It's about getting back up. Like, do you have the resilience? Yes, I'm going to take a break. Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes, or maybe I need to take a 30-minute nap or something like that. Do I get back up and then go to work again? I think that's, I never thought about it that way. Yeah, that's really cool. But that, yeah, it's like a resilience of work. Like, do you have the mental, it's not about mental stamina. Like that's what I thought before. Like that's resilience. No, it's not about mental stamina. It's about, do you get back up? Do you get back to work?
Yeah. I think this is a good way to build that resilience. I mean, obviously you can build it long term in terms of like maybe starting multiple companies or different projects. That's one way. But like one simple way you can do it, which doesn't have to take years, is like just this simple example, like taking breaks, like maybe every 25 minutes. There's a Pomodoro, I think it's called, timer or something like that, where you have to take breaks every 25 minutes for 5 minutes. And I think the most, like myself, is I'm scared to take those breaks because I'm afraid like I just don't have enough time during the day like that. But if you think about it really, okay, how many breaks are you going to take? Let's say 5, 6, you multiply by 5 minutes. Is that actually like so much time during the day it's going to take? No, it's not about that. It's about probably, because sometimes if you work like constantly without taking breaks, you may start like getting in tunnel vision, and sometimes you just need to step out from that, So I think that this is a very good way to build that resilience. I would like to ask you, because we work together and I know some of your past in terms of entrepreneurship, and we both had to go through like some hard times in our entrepreneurship life where we had to, there were some hard times when, we didn't know if we were going to make it, and then we have to come back. So I think that was a good example of resilience. I would just like to get your insight, like some examples in your life, maybe when you had that, really had, you learned to build up resilience. So many.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic. Okay, I remember this is like a really touchy subject, but my first entrepreneurial endeavor was it was a website. It was kind of like a website application called Bizential, and the idea at the time was it was like a cross between Facebook and LinkedIn, but on steroids, like where you have like all these built-in applications, like things to record audio, things to record video, and each, entrepreneur or business that used Bizential would basically have their own, page where they could, market or sell their services, I guess was the idea. It's a very big concept. Definitely with that idea, like tons of feature creep. I think it lasted like 18 months, and it was really probably 17 months too long. Like it was just too big of an idea, and way too much to build, and just never, I don't even think we even got a beta off the ground. I had like 4 or 5 programmers working with me. They were all doing it part-time. It was probably a disaster. As I look back now with the wisdom that I have over the years, it was a really bad idea. We should have gone that direction. But I remember there was so much pride in me. I thought like, it's a brilliant idea. I'm super smart. I'm very driven, and this thing's going to be a huge success. And if it's not a huge success, like I don't know. I don't know if I could live with that. And, I know there's like several times in that journey where I just like so much pressure on myself because if I failed, it was like I was going to die. And the truth is I was also, when I was younger too, like I was dealing with a lot of depression. Like I'd have a couple good months and then a couple bad months, and then good month and then a bad month. And my life was always like this with depression. And when that business finally did fail, when we finally just, closed down the doors on it, there's a couple other things that happened at that time, but like I went into severe depression, and it all culminated in just a weekend where my ex was out of town, and I actually, there was a build up to even that weekend. It was like 1 month where I started to go into depression, and I was just so tired of being depressed and so angry with that feeling, and that, going through this my whole life. I said to myself, I'm going to burn this out of me. I'm either going to survive this or I'm going to burn it out of me. And so for that whole month, one of my biggest things with my depression is like anything that happened in my life, like if I made a mistake or whatever, I would always add on top of it. So I'd add on top of it, oh, you're so stupid, you're this, like this, rather than just recognizing the mistake and moving on, like recognizing it, having a plan of action, how you to change it, make sure it doesn't happen again. I would just add on to it. I just beat myself up mentally. And so for that month, I said, I'm going to burn this out of me. And I just, like, every little thought that I had that was negative, I would add on to it as much as I could. Just like really just burn it out. And I do not suggest this as a therapy technique for anyone. This is, I hope that no one would ever try this. It was really bad, but it culminated at the end, end of that pretty much month that I was doing that, on a weekend where I was like, this is the weekend. And I don't know if I necessarily planned for what happened, but it happened. Like, the whole weekend, I drank, and, at the time, cause I've had, back surgery and stuff like that. I have, back problems. At the time, I was getting like, very hard drugs like, Percocet and stuff like that for my back pain. And I would just, chugging those pills, drinking tons of alcohol, and just verbally, beating myself up, but also, especially the last night, physically beating myself up, if you can believe that. And that, just a very dramatic, bad night, and ended up with a gun in my mouth.
Yeah. I know you tell me a lot of times it's not the first time I hear this story. And every time I hear it, it's quite hard to.
Yeah, it's
listen to,
ended up with a gun in my mouth, and luckily, it didn't pull the trigger or anything. I couldn't do it. But I woke up the next morning, looked in, washing my face, and just felt awful, just like physically, just felt awful. And I remember washing my face and like looking up into the mirror, and kind of for the first time in my life, kind of saw myself from the outside, and something, I don't know if it was a voice or just, words that came to me or whatever, but it just said, why are you so awful to this wonderful person? And like, honestly, that moment, ever since that moment, like, it just changed. My life changed, just because I finally got to see myself. And anyone that's been, suffering from depression or anxiety or something like that, you can kind of see yourself from the outside and see how wonderful you really are, just as a human. You're not perfect. You're not none of these things.
Sorry to interrupt you here, but I want to add a really good point here, is that sometimes to start your healing, like, you really need to hit your, like, rock bottom. Sometimes you need to do, not, in no way try to, like, beat yourself up, like, to get to that point. I think it comes naturally. If it has to come, it will come naturally. Or you might be right now at the rock bottom. And that's a very good place to start, because you're like tired of this. You're like, I'm tired. I'm done with this. And you're like motivated to change. Because sometimes, when you're not at the rock bottom, you're like, okay, I'm going to start a bit, and then you're like, not. So you're like half-hearted.
Yeah.
And like, this is a good example of when you're like, you're done with, like, and that voice that came, came and said like, okay, I'm like done with this and I want like a change. I don't want to suffer for my whole life from this. So it's no way discouraging people that are like at rock bottom. That's a very good place to start your healing.
Yeah. It's a different perspective. Is if you are at rock bottom, you have nowhere else to go but up. But exactly. I remember that voice that just said like, why are you so awful to this wonderful person? Whatever you're going through, you don't need to add to it. Because that was kind of like the big thing I was doing that, before that, but even, that month was just adding to it, that concept of, here's what happened, like this is a mistake. And now you just keep adding to it and you don't need to, you don't like that. It serves no purpose to do that. So, that kind of changed everything in terms of just how I looked at life. And so like in terms of mistakes or anything, rather than something that would kind of beat me down into a depression or something like that, it became an opportunity of, this happened, let's recognize it. And now you don't need to add to it. Just have a plan, have a plan. This isn't going to happen again because I'm going to do this, or this is not going to happen again because I'm going to change these things or change my mentality to do something different. So,
I suppose it was not also super easy, right? For you, it was still hard. Like,
that's the negative thoughts, come and negative thoughts still come. But how I deal with them has completely changed. It's just a different, it's a curiosity. Like that's another thing that's happened. I think that's a big piece of resilience as well, is a curiosity for what's next. Like whatever's going on in your life right now, whatever hard times you're going through, be curious. Sometimes you can't even be hopeful because like things are so bad. It's like hard to be hopeful. But if you can remain curious as what is next, and also understand the impermanence of life, like things are constantly changing. Things are always going to change. They're going to have good times and bad times, but know that whatever time you're going through now is going to change. It is going to get better, and be curious of, okay, well, how is that going to unfold? I'm curious to see what happens next. How is this going to change? And how can I be an active participant in that change? So, that was like probably one of the first big things I went through. There's been so many other stories and journeys of like hard times, even like in college and, other entrepreneurial endeavors. But that was kind of the first and the biggest one that I think really changed me as a person in terms of my mental strength, my resilience, and just also just how to go through life happier because I'm not so focused on like the bad things that happen, good things that happen. I kind of receive them all with curiosity.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I recently discovered also the acceptance kind of mindset, because before I heard about accepting wherever at what stage you are, what happens to you, accepting it as it is. But I didn't really know what to think about it or how to accept this, because a lot of times when you think about accepting it where you are, you're like, okay, so this means I'm going to be like this for the rest of my life, so I have to accept. And another good insight from my therapist was that you're not accepting that you're going to be like this for the rest of your life. You're just accepting what are you experiencing in this moment. And it doesn't mean you're going to be like this, because things change, like it can be 1 month, can be maybe half a year, you might feel like depressed or sad, or some things may happen. And even if they are long, it's just the idea of impermanence. Like there's nothing that everything changes. So accepting at what stage you are and how you're feeling for myself is just taking that pressure off, that why I'm feeling this. It's just like I'm experiencing this. I don't know why. I don't know. Like you don't have to have those answers, but you just accept where you are and what are you experiencing, and that's already a very good like start for your healing, I think. Because if you don't accept that, okay, let's say, because I'm dealing sometimes with intrusive thoughts. So if I don't accept my intrusive thoughts and I say, okay, I don't want this, like it's not gonna work. Like if I don't accept my intrusive thoughts, I don't accept that I have this specific intrusive thoughts. I'm always gonna have this battle with me. You know? But at the moment I accept, okay, I'm having intrusive thoughts. They may not be nice, but I'm having them. I accept them, and what's interesting is when you accept them, they suddenly kind of disappear by themselves.
Yeah.
And here's the important thing is like, don't try to fake accept it. Like, oh, I'm accepting, but you're not accepting it and waiting for it to just disappear. It's not going to work. You like really have to accept it. Like naturally it has to come, right? Did you experience something like that?
Yeah. So as you know, I won't go into super detail, but like, during 2020, like I just basically lost, everything that was important to me. Like, my little family, my father passed away, and we lost the business we were working on for 4.5 years because of COVID, and then even on top of that was just like severe like health problems, like my back. I re-injured my back. I injured my neck, and like lost feeling and movement in my arm. So like, from every facet of my life, financially, health-wise, like mentally, like I was just in a really bad place. And, for a period, like about 3.5 months, I was pretty much laid up in bed every day. So through all that, like I also developed anxiety attacks. And it was really the first time in my life that I experienced that. The only other person I've really ever talked to about anxiety, like, was you. Like, you tell me you were, these anxiety attacks.
Yeah.
And like, when you tell me that, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's like stress, it's like no big deal. Like stress that I've experienced in my life. I've experienced stressful times. Like, you can get through it. No big deal. It was the first time I've really experienced anxiety attacks and fully understood how debilitating they are, like debilitating, physically, but also like even just work, like how anxiety can get in the way of work. It really, it's debilitating, how it can, when you're got all these things going on and you're trying to work and you can't, because you feel, for me at least, you feel hopeless in those moments. So I've done a lot of work over the last year, like talking, working with counselors and just different types of therapies, and I've come a long way. But I still, I've come a long way. But I would still say, like, I have anxiety attacks here and there. What I've learned just pretty much in the last 3-4 months that I've really worked on is that acceptance, like that you're talking about. And for me, it was kind of, it was kind of a strange, it was uncomfortable concept of like, well, I'm just supposed to accept this, and like, how do I, I don't want to have this feeling. I don't want to have this anxiety going on. And it's, again, like, I have to look at it like a layers. Is like when you're feeling that anxiety and now you're trying to push it down, you're also adding to it of like, I don't want to feel this, blah, blah, blah. This is so stupid. Like, why am I feeling this way? So you're like, this internal dialogue is just adding layers and layers and layers to it. So what I really worked on, like the last couple months, I would say, and I'm not perfect at it, but I'm trying, is when those feelings come, part of that acceptance, the thing that works for me is not just saying, okay, like, I accept this feeling. It's okay. You're here. You're here. You're this anxiety, kind of like a different person. You're here. What are you worried about? Tell me what you're worried about. And I listen. I listen to those things that it's worried about. It's worried about, I've got to get this project done, and I've got to do this. And like, what if I don't do this and I fail, and all these voices. So I listen to them and I say, okay, well, here's our plan. Here's what we're going to do about that. For that thing, we're going to work on that this morning. We're going to put this many hours towards it, and we're going to get that done. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. And this thing here, we're going to do this. And so it's basically talking to those things, realizing what they want to tell you, and then coming up with a plan of action. Cause like, you got to look at those pieces, those anxiety, those voices. They're kind of like, they're different parts of you. They're different people, and each one of them is concerned, and their purpose is not to hurt you. It's actually to help you. They're there to, they're trying to protect you. They're worried. And so if you listen to them and stop pushing them down, you listen to them and come up with a plan of action with them, use them as allies in your journey. That's what's worked well for me as far as like dealing with those anxiety attacks. Again, I still have them. I wish I didn't have them. When you first told me about them, I didn't fully appreciate what an anxiety attack is. And now that I've experienced them, yeah, they suck. So yeah, I don't want to have them. I wish I could snap my fingers and they just never have them again. But yeah, they're here, and you just got to learn to listen to them and just treat them like a friend, like they're here to help you.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because my mom it's literally what you said exactly. So when I was going for anxiety, studying in Netherlands, and going for a lot of anxiety, panic attacks and all that stuff, I was talking with my mom sometimes, kind of introduced her like what I'm feeling and like how these things are feeling. And she would like reassure me, like, like a mom, reassure me everything's going to be fine, don't be worried and stuff. I mean, she did the best she could. But it's interesting that she experienced those anxiety attacks. She never experienced them before. And then she experienced like after 2 years or something like that. And when she experienced them, she's like, wow, like now I get like how it feels. And it's like, I understand like, by just like trying to reassure like everything's gonna be fine or something like that, that's not really working, and it's like a completely different. It's actually dangerous sometimes to keep reassuring someone that has anxiety and anxiety attacks, because then that person just comes to them all the time for those reassurance. And I have unfortunately some friends that they are for years stuck in that reassurance seeking thing, and they never can get past that. Anxiety, panic attacks, and all this stuff is just because they have a short-term solution that they can just always get it. So that's a very dangerous thing.
It's like a pill or a drug. It's like any addiction. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like you said, for me, what works, I'm not saying that I'm not having anxiety attacks or panic attacks anymore. I have them a lot less often than I used to, but sometimes it can be like very randomly, just like in the mall, or it can be a restaurant. Like everything is fine, like everything is beautiful, like no problem, no panics, nothing. It just can appear that sensation of something's gonna go wrong. And nothing is wrong in the situation you are. It's just something is you're gonna have that panic.
Yeah.
And what helped me a lot is that just be mindful of my sensations. Like I'm not trying to accept that in that moment, anything, like not trying to go through any process of thinking what to do. But for me, it's just being mindful of the sensations, because you have those sensations like maybe in your hands, in your chest, in your tummy, probably in your stomach. You have them, for me at least. So I'm just trying to be like really mindful and curious about like, okay, what I'm experiencing and where. And then you can just ask yourself, sometimes it works. You can ask yourself, so if I have a panic attack right now, I'm in the middle of the restaurant, there's like people, like if I have a panic attack, like what's worst case? And you just go to the bathroom, you puke and you come back, like, not a big deal. I mean, it happens all the time. So, and when you kind of give that, and you can even take a break from discussing with any, because the more you try to like pretend you're fine and you're like keep talking with your friends as you normally do, the more it pushes you. So what you can do is just like take a break. You don't need to act like you're perfectly fine. Just like take a break from the conversation, and you can excuse yourself, or you can just be mindful by yourself. And then you'll see that pressure goes off, and you can maybe you can come back to it's really practice at that time. You have to practice and go through it so you can learn how to kind of go through it. And I think it's also a little bit scary when we think about that. Once I never had anxiety panic attacks before, like maybe you're like 30 years old or 40 years old and say, I never had them, and now I'm having them. So I wish I never had them, because you may think that I'm going to have them for the rest of my life. It's like a curse. Once you get them, that's it. And I think that's also a kind of dangerous way to think about it, because you may just subconsciously link yourself with that anxiety. Like, okay, I'm anxiety. I'm this anxiety panic attacks. So I'm not going to get rid of them. And that's me. And once you make that association with me and these anxiety panic attacks, that's a little bit dangerous. And just instead, you can just look at it as an experience. Like, you may experience depression. You may never experience depression. And then one day you experience that. It doesn't mean that that's your whole life. It's just a moment, maybe a year, 2, 3. You don't need to put like a time on it,
Yeah.
I hate to interrupt, but this episode is broken into 2 parts. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you won't miss the second part of this episode when it releases. This has been another episode of the Anxious Developer Podcast with me, Andrei Skrvac. Make sure to follow me on Twitter. You can find me at Andrei_Skrvac, as well as on Instagram at Andrei.Skrvac. I would love to connect with you. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's the best way for you to let me know what I can improve. Thanks everyone for listening. Have an amazing week.